All right. Well, thank you for joining today's webinar, Essential Deployment Considerations when Moving to a Cloud Call Center. The session will be recorded, and you'll receive a link via email to play back that recording. All phones will be muted during the webinar, and we will unmute the lines at the end of the presentation for any questions. My name is Rich Fox. I'm your speaker for the day. I've been around the block for a little bit and had a lot of fun on the contact center side of the world. Been both responsible from an operations perspective for large call centers as well as a technology perspective. I enjoy, you'll find that my passion is about call centers and especially cloud call centers over the last several years, as I've been able to address a lot of the challenges I faced in the premise-based world, even spending tons of money on top-end solutions. So I'm happy to share my experiences with you today on what I've learned about when you're deploying to the cloud. So we're going to talk about these 5 areas. We're going to talk about call quality. We're going to talk about change management. We're going to talk about training, the migration process, and then, of course, planning for the unexpected, as any technology project will lead us to. So let's start with call quality. We are a call center. We're in the business of talking over the phone. Of course, we need quality calls to keep our customer satisfaction high. Well, we're not talking about customer satisfaction quality. We're literally talking about the quality of the voice connection. Mobile phones have become very ubiquitous in today's society, and yet we all still experience regular issues every day where calls are choppy or garbled or seem like we're talking to a person on the moon via tin can. We're talking about that kind of quality. And basically, I can boil this conversation down to basically one major decision. Are you connecting to your cloud contact center via a private network? In other words, are you purchasing connections to that cloud provider from them or from a third-party carrier or one of your existing providers that is dedicated to just handling your voice traffic? And so basically, this is a private connection between you and the underlying technology platform. The reason you install a private connection is to guarantee what we call quality of service, or QoS, and we're going to talk more about that in a moment. Through a private connection, you're able to completely control the technology elements that can negatively impact the quality of your calls. The other option is to use the public internet to connect to the cloud. In this case, you basically are plugging into the internet and riding those connections that are shared by your neighbors and other businesses and all those other people out there, social media and video streaming and everything else that happens on the internet. But you're simply riding those waves of the internet, and effectively becomes the wild, wild west where you're not in control of those technology elements that affect call quality. So to understand that more, let's talk for a moment about quality of service, or QoS. So what is this QoS? QoS has several technology elements. I'm not going to bore you with them today, and you may not be interested in them. But if you are, go ahead and Google QoS, and you'll quickly understand all the gory details of what that means. But QoS in a nutshell is about ensuring the priority of your voice traffic. Your voice travels in small chunks across any of these networks called packets. If those packets are delayed, they get slowed down. On the wild, wild west of the internet, they take a circuitous route for one set of packets, and they take a more direct route for another set of packets. They can arrive out of sequence. And when that happens, your calls become garbled or choppy, just like that mobile phone, in a bad service area. With QoS, the network prioritizes those packets just like you and I prioritize our day. But it does so in real time, in nanoseconds, since voice traffic demands a high-quality connection and can't be delayed. So the network that's handling your voice packets needs to have that QoS intelligence to give voice packets priority over others that can be delayed. So if the network is getting congested, or your particular links that you're riding are getting congested, QoS will delay other traffic. So for instance, it will delay the web search for a few milliseconds, and although you'll never know your web search was delayed a little bit, the network was able to preserve the quality of your voice calls by letting those voice packets leapfrog ahead of the web search traffic. So essentially, just like we prioritize, the network is taking those voice packets and always making them a top priority and moving them to the top of the queue and moving them ahead of others. So since they are more critical, your data, the internet by nature is is used to delays and slowness. Obviously not when you're streaming, but even then you have the whole buffering thing that we're all used to. Voice is far more sensitive and doesn't allow that. So similarly, if you have a real heavy streaming download, that can be slowed to make more bandwidth available for voice traffic that needs to do that leapfrogging and just simply can't be delayed. And even the transactions inside your own business applications can be modified by the network intelligence so that nothing becomes as critical as a voice call. So you may have inside your network voice calls are the top priority. You may have your business applications are second priority, and internet is third priority. It all depends. There may be other layers in there too, but basically the network is applying that intelligence. With a private network, you can apply these QoS principles. It understands the different types of traffic and prioritizes them. When your voice traffic travels a public network, there is no prioritization, no intelligence. All traffic is basically treated of equal importance. So why would you use a public internet connection to handle your voice traffic? Well, it's darn cheap. That's why. The availability of very, very high bandwidth at dirt cheap prices makes public internet very, very compelling. Private networks cost more money for much, much less bandwidth, but you can control them and apply that intelligence. So this is a trade-off that many companies have to make. So from a control perspective, why can't I get QoS over the internet? Well, the internet is just a conglomeration of many interconnected networks that aren't smart enough to support QoS. And each request you make on the web may take a different path depending on what's going on at that moment in time. That's just the nature of the internet. There are ways to have an internet connection, a direct internet connection that does support QoS, but for the most part, when you purchase an internet connection, that's simply just not available to you since there's multiple networks that are involved and won't honor sort of that QoS prioritization. And more so, even if you do deploy over the public internet, if you called Comcast or Verizon or whoever your provider is, Time Warner Cable, and tell them you're having a problem with a voice connection on their network to a cloud call center, they're really not going to be able to help you. I mean, of course, they'll probably try and offer you their services, but they're not going to be able to help you resolve voice quality issue. So, there is no cavalry. There isn't some, pixie dust or, secret sauce that we could apply that fixes that internet. So, what's the right approach? Well, I still recommend private networks for most organizations that want to have smooth sailing across the network. So I recommend the use of a private network as the primary means of handling voice traffic, and use an public internet connection for backup. So that is, calls traverse the private network, and if that network is unavailable, the calls automatically travel over the internet until that private connection is available again. That way you get the benefit of both networks and only use the internet for those couple times a year when you encounter network issues. Many small businesses are willing to accept the trade-off of public internet. That there will be some periods of time where calls just won't be great. Some days will be bad. But this is a typical risk versus reward business decision that needs to be made, and some companies are happy to roll the dice and it may be smooth sailing the vast majority of the time. Other times you may hit that submerged obstacle that you never saw and end up like this guy who clearly isn't having a good day, and I certainly hope that he has a phone that's working right now too. So let's talk about change management. I can't stress enough, like any technology project, communicate, and then over-communicate some more. So, why are we making this change? What are the benefits? How does this change our operations? How does this align with our values and our organizational goals? The more we can communicate to our staff and our agents, the more people understand the why behind things, the better off they will be. So communicating, in my experience with the deployments we've done, communicating in different ways, in team meetings, in town halls, via email, posters in the break room, lunchroom, talking it up amongst the teams informally. The more we get buy-in, and the more the people understand the why. The why is the critical piece. It's not just hey, this change is occurring. the why behind it, is the critical element. Otherwise, it's just another thing shoved down our throats. And my favorite, we all see things through our own lenses, and we listen to our own very favorite radio station, WIIFM. What's in it for me? And if I don't understand the why, then if I don't like it because it means things change for me or there's different expectations for me, I may, I'm likely to resist that change. You have a few naysayers who don't understand the goals, who perceive things in a negative way. They can quickly torpedo your team's morale and create a toxic climate around that technology change. You got to know who your influencers are, who do others listen to, who do they respect, and then who are the loudmouths. I mean, these are the people you always have to pay attention to. You got to pay attention to not only the naysayers and the loudmouths and the influential ones, but the administrative assistants, the receptionists, the key agents, the operators that have a lot of influence or have the ears of a lot of other people, who are often the lifeblood of the organization. If you take care of them, then often the others will follow suit, and you probably, right out of the gate could, know who I'm talking about in your organization that sort of fits, that bill. So, WIIFM, that's my view of the world, and it's all about me. So make sure I understand. The good news is that a call center gives you complete transparency of your customer's experience and your agent's performance. The bad news is that you now have complete transparency of your agent's performance, and they don't like it. So what I've found is if you share the data and share the insights with your team, let them see how they're performing, how they perform against the rest of the team, let them understand the calculations behind the math that you're doing and the reporting, have them understand your expectations and why. Like anything else, people will try and poke holes in the data. Initially, they'll have disbelief in the data and try and discredit it. Over time, they will accept the new insights and the performance expectations that typically come along with them with the new technology. In our last webinar of this series, this is the fourth in the 4 parts, we talked about this, where you really need to carefully navigate these waters. If this is new insights, if this technology gives you new insights into your organization, I can't stress enough treading lightly, really understanding the data before people react to it, sharing the data, let you collectively gather the insights from that data, establish new baselines, new expectations, and very slowly introduce those new metrics or performance expectations in a very slow and conscientious manner so as not to have that mutiny on the boat there. And you end up like that guy sitting alone on the bow of the destroyed sailboat. But so the good news is complete transparency. The bad news is complete transparency. So that people don't like Big Brother. So one of the things that I love about training a new customer, especially in the cloud call center, is the ability to operate in parallel. At Evolve IP, we typically have a new system live for a week before the customer actually migrates to the new system. So during that week, all the agents and staff can be trained. The agents can actually use their new phones, the new call center client software. They can make outbound customer calls. They can use it to make internal calls. They can call into the call center, listen to the customer call flows to understand the customer's experience. That way we encourage agents to take turns being a customer and playing out the typical call scenarios with their fellow agents on the new technology. They can work through the different, it's different technology. There's going to be a different set of sequence of actions they need to take. There's a different set of keys they have to press, that's inherent in a change in technology. We'd much rather them fumble with their peers than a live customer call. This operating in parallel and training in parallel allows for a real smooth transition because the agents are really comfortable with the new tools and technologies by the time they go live. And this is one of the nice things from the cloud call center perspective. And then the second piece of that, as always, final step is having that on-site support the day the new system goes live. Brings comfort to the agents having a knowledgeable call center person walking the floor to help them through the new technology. There's always little things that come up on every go live, and having that support system in place is So we got our new system installed. We've ensured our call quality meets our expectations. We've got our agents on board. We're culturally ready for the change, and our staff is trained and ready. So what's left? So the final step, and that end of that week I mentioned earlier, is to migrate, or officially called port, your phone numbers to the new platform. This is a common function handled by the telecom carriers of the world that basically involves the numbers being physically migrated from one owner to another effectively in a national database, if you will. The actual migration just takes a few minutes. So for those customers that are trained in parallel, on the day of the port, basically, the old phone stops ringing, and a few minutes later the new phone starts ringing. Typically it's something we do off hours. So if you're going live on a Friday, on Thursday you use your normal phone. On Friday you come in, the phone, you can still have your old phone and your new phone on your desk, but the new phone now is live with customer calls. So it's pretty very straightforward, the actual port. Now, the process leading up to the port is the challenge. It's an administrative challenge getting those numbers actually cleared for the porting process. So why is that? The carriers can make this process very difficult and demand this very precise paperwork. Well, why is that? Well, the carrier that's losing those numbers, has a tendency to not want to give up those numbers because they're giving up revenue. So they're not the most supportive, and hence they have a difficult paperwork process that is very, there are specific timelines they need to respond to. So you submit a request, it could take 7 days for them to respond. They can be done in a day, but they're not going to respond until the 7th day. They sort of push it to the limits and always work to the outside edge because they're losing revenue. Becomes even more challenging in many cases for a lot of customers who don't have a good handle on their invoices, or they've invoices from multiple suppliers under multiple names. They've acquired organizations, they've grown organically, and they've added organizations, and over time, they've got a lot of different invoices from a lot of different companies, and even the names are spelled slightly differently. So maybe you abbreviated a company name. Maybe it says Inc. on the end. Maybe it doesn't say Inc. on the end. If you don't have the paperwork exactly right for every number, that matches every bill, it gets rejected. So it could say, Rich Fox Inc. On one, and the next one says Rich Fox Inc. period. And if you don't have the period, that basically that whole request gets rejected, and you go through another sort of rework loop to get it right. So it's not rocket science, but it does have the potential to impact your go live dates. And then the other piece that you need to consider is preserving any information you want from your old system before you complete that migration, and that data is no longer available to you. So, if you have any historical reports that you want for future reference, that data is not going to be in the new system. You want to pull that data. If you have any custom reporting, you want to make sure that the new system, has that data for you. Are there old voicemails that you need? Will you migrate to the new system on the first day of a new month to keep your data clean? So if you're going to go live September 15th, you now have half your data in sort of, let's call it the old reports, and have half your data in the new reports. Some customers want to have a clean set of data, so they'll wait till the first day of the month to go live. That way they know effective October 1st, my reports are all clean in the new system versus having to have a blend of two different sets of reports. And typically, of course, the reports are not the same because they're different systems and they have different content. Results, obviously, the content may be the same, but the format may be different. So just thinking ahead with the assumption that all of my old data will be gone, just making sure you don't leave yourself in a bind down the road from that perspective. So we've all been down this road before. Everything's going smooth. You're confident. You let your guard down, and bam, Murphy's Law hits. Maybe it's a key player that gets sick. Maybe there's a last-minute glitch. Maybe your team revolts. Who knows what will go wrong, but you need to prepare for it. So, I'll tell you one of the surprises I've seen a lot, in the cloud side of the call center is it's not really a glitch, but it's a surprise for many call center customers that go live on our platform. All of a sudden, the call center has far more calls than they expected, and they think there's something wrong with this new technology since their service levels are plummeting or their abandon rates are off the charts. Well, this is a good news, bad news story. We talked about this in earlier webinars, but in many cases we find that customers were blocking calls and were completely unaware that they didn't have enough phone line capacity, which resulted in customers receiving busy signals and those calls never making it inside the customer's phone system. With the cloud call center, at least with Evolve IP, our customers have unlimited capacity instead of a fixed trunk capacity, of a legacy phone system. So the bad news is your results may not look so good on day one, and the good news is that you now have a lot more opportunity and a lot more calls to improve customer satisfaction, increase revenues, serve those underserved customers that weren't getting served before, and achieve whatever strategic goals is that your organization is targeting. That's one scenario. Of course, there's lots more. Be prepared, be nimble, be flexible, and you'll overcome whatever Murphy throws at you. So we're reaching the. I'm going to open the floor up to questions in a minute. We're right on track for our 24-minute webinar. I'm going to unmute the phones. If you want to ask, you now have the ability to ask a question. You're going to have to unmute your phone manually, which is by pressing *1 and then ask your question. Any questions I can answer for you?
Hey, Rich, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
We've been looking to move to a cloud-based system, just really with the primary goal of having people work from home. I mean, there's a lot of benefits, obviously, to the remote worker program there. Have you had any experience with, has remote workers on the system experienced any difficulties with call quality and dropping and things like that, since they are going to rely on a bring-your-own connection in terms of like a cable connection or a fiber from Fios or something like that?
So, well, yes and no. That's a good question. Thank you. There's multiple ways an agent can work from home, and depending on the method, call quality, can be an issue. So, first off, here at Evolve IP, we have a feature we call Remote Office that allows you to basically turn any 10-digit phone number into your business handset. So every call that you would have received on your business desk, your business handset, is set to that alternative 10-digit number. The calling party's caller ID is preserved. The calls are still reported. The calls are still recorded and tracked. Your supervisors can silently monitor and barge into those calls. So what that means is that basically your employee can use their home phone number or any other line or landline as if it was their office phone. That's the cleanest and simplest approach, and you're not really addressing call quality issues per se because you're using existing phone networks. And that's the cleanest and easiest approach. Another approach is to take your Evolve IP handset home and plug it into your home router. Now in this case, the phone works exactly the same as it did in the office. You'll need to tell the phone that you're now at home versus in the office in case you dial 911. Otherwise, we would send the dispatcher to the office. So there's a configuration on the phone to prompt you to do that. But other than that, it works the same. But now the calls will traverse your employee's internet connection instead of their landline. And now we're back to the use of the internet, which can introduce those call quality discussions we discussed earlier. The third and final approach is to use a soft phone. A soft phone is software you install on your iPad, your Mac, your PC, whatever, and it turns that device into your phone. You plug a headset into that device. The calls traverse the employee's internet connection. This, from a technology complexity perspective, this is the most challenging approach since there's a lot of moving parts that comes into play. Not only dealing with the internet, but now you're dealing with the capabilities and horsepower of the device you're using that has effectively become your phone. So what's the right answer? Safest and easiest approach, something like Remote Office. However, more and more folks, of course, are going to say, well, my people don't have home phone lines anymore. My people only have cell phones. So either that or the company doesn't want to pay for the home phone line or some additional cost for each employee. So, the good news in the remote office scenario is that the home phone line never actually incurs any outbound, local or long-distance usage. So the employee can order a very basic phone plan. That can still range. I added one to my house. It was $10 a month, but it could be upwards of $30 a month. And that's sort of your cleanest and safest approach. Taking the handset home can be a bit clunky. Lugging a phone back and forth and having to worry about those kinds of issues. So many companies think soft phone is the answer. In reality, soft phone is a good 80-85% solution. Some employees will have problems they'll have chronic problems with their call quality. It may be their home equipment. It may be challenges with their internet provider. And so, so for the 85% you're good. For that remaining 20%, there's going to be some support challenges for you in dealing with these sort of people that have these sporadic, frustrating issue, because then you get into things like, well, I couldn't work. Are they getting paid? Or they're not getting paid if they can't work because their internet connection or they're having an issue. So what a lot of companies do is they sort of go into it eyes wide open, knowing that soft phone is not a 100% solution. They start with the soft phones, do testing with the soft phones, and then fall back to a landline for those agents with the chronic challenges. So for the 80%, you go soft phone. For the 20%, you do something like the remote office, where you get a cleaner cleaner result, but it costs you a little bit more because of that extra phone line that you may need to incur costs on. I know that was a long answer, but did I address your question?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That was it's just good to have multiple options. We were concerned about the quality of the home bandwidth option, but
yeah,
with the remote office, I mean, you're right. With the dependability of just a good old-fashioned POTS line, or even the voice over the cable services, it's reliable enough that's a great failover. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? I know we're coming up at the bottom of the hour here, or bottom of the half hour. Any other questions out there I can answer for you?
Hi there. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. I was just wondering, it seems like there's a lot of things to consider here, and I'm just wondering how long it typically is for implementation for a cloud call center?
Well, that's another great question. Thank you. The good news is the implementation is pretty quick. In our example at Evolve IP, it's typically 45 to 60 days, after the customer, completes the contract. There's really two drivers of the dates, the two long poles in the tent, if you will, that dictate that timeline are getting the network implemented that we talked about, public and private and all that good stuff, and that administrative dance that we talked about, that administrative dance we talked about regarding getting numbers successfully ready to port, from the current carrier. And all the other activities like designing the call center, documenting the call flows, training, all that stuff occurs in parallel with the network implementation. And in our case, typically, our goal is to be live within 1 week of the network being ready. So, depending on the network design and carriers involved, it's a 45 to 60-day range. It can swing in either direction. But it's really that network question that drives the dates. Everything else can happen in parallel. So, does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions out there? All right, we're coming up, 2:31 of my time on the East Coast here. So I want to thank you very much for your time and participation. I hope you found this valuable. You will get an email link that includes the recording within the next couple of days. Thanks again, and have a great day.